So today is Sodom. Yeah, so today we're going to look at Sodom. So we're in the archaeology thing. This week we're going to do Sodom. I'm hoping we can get through that this week. And then next week is going to be almost all pictures that I'm going to bring you in. You're going to travel the Holy Land on both sides of the Jordan and see what archaeology has already uncovered. I could talk about it in a class all day. You need to see the pictures. And we'll have a really good time next week with that. And then probably from there, we'll go to prophecy, and we're going to look at, it's like those, you could take a year going through all the prophecy that's occurred and been fulfilled exactly as was. We won't do that, but that'll be next. And then I've been talking to him. I think what I'd like to do next, probably starting in January, we're going to do an end time study. And when I do one, I start with Genesis 1:1, and we go through the Bible. We'll end up in Revelation, but by the time we do, you're going to have such a foundation for understanding the book of Revelation. So that's probably where we're headed in January, small whiteboard or not. So you're going to see some things, at least I hope today. Before we look at pictures and I talk about the dig and so on, well, he was actually Abram, I guess, at the time. Yeah, here's an interesting one I'll put up here. You probably never think of these things. When I when I got my PhD, my dissertation was all on Abraham. Tremendous amount of research, but I lived in the book of Genesis for years. And things start to come out that you just don't normally see in a Sunday school class. And we're going to look at a whole bunch of questions. Why did God destroy Sodom? Will be a topic of our discussion today as well. But I want to start with a greater context and bring you down into what Sodom was like then, what city life was like, and the culture and everything, in briefly, because I do want to get the pictures. Does anybody remember what the age of Abraham was when he left Haran with his nephew Lot and his wife Sarah? His dad had died in Haran, who was also called Haran, interesting enough. But his father passed away in Haran. Abraham, his nephew Lot, and Sarah leave. Notice that Lot is referenced as Lot, not Lot and his family. He didn't have any at that point. It'll come back to play later. So they go to Haran, and then they leave, and Abraham is 75. Oh, boy, I got to get better at writing on these things. I want a bigger one so I can make a real big mess. He was 75 when he left there. And if you remember, he came down, I believe it's Shechem, was with sort of the first stop when they got into Canaan. Built an altar, praise God for getting them there. From there, they went down to between, this is going to be important to us too. They stopped between, or camped or whatever, between Bethel, and you all probably know it as Ai. It's actually pronounced I. And they camped between the two. And just to give you a little, Wes's horrible drawing here. This is the highlands, the ridge that runs down through Israel. Bethel and Ai are on this ridge, and they're looking down. I'll start up here. Sea of Galilee, and then the Jordan River does this till it gets to about here. Then you have the plain of Jordan. There she is. And the plain of Jordan dumps into another body of water. What's at the other end of the Jordan River? Dead Sea. Here's your trivia question for the day. The next Bible cocktail party you're at, you'll be able to discuss this more. What does the word Jordan or Jordan over there, what does it mean? The descending, if I can spell it right. means the descending. Up here, you got, I think it's Mount Hermon, 14,000 feet or whatever. Rain, snows, all that drains into the Sea of Galilee. And of course, we've got from Magdala, Capernaum, and all that all around there. Sea of Galilee then feeds into here. And the reason that it does is you're up high. This is 1,300 feet below sea level, the Dead Sea. The river is descending the whole time, and that's why it got called the Jordan River. So at your next Bible cocktail party, you can. So it's called but in any case, so they're coming up out of Canaan, into Canaan. The Shechem's over here, and then Bethel and Ai is actually on this side of the ridge, but it's okay. When you get down to the Dead Sea, right about here, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here. This is Jericho. Jerusalem is about here. Hebron is south of Jericho about now. I don't know. It's not probably joined together. It used to be about 20 miles south of Jerusalem. Jericho, there's a road or a path in those days that came off the highlands, and Jericho's down here in the Jordan Plain. There's a road you follow. You hit here. This becomes a highway. This goes on down, and down in here, you're going to have Masada. People familiar with Masada, where they all went up and, suicide and all that. You're going to have David's stronghold. You're going to have the Qumran caves, all of that. Going this way is Jericho, and you work your way up. Again, that's a ridge, not a road. Jericho actually has a road. You'll end up at the Sea of Galilee. This is Jericho. What are these 5 X's right here? 5 mean anything? 5? Anybody? They're the 5 cities of the city-state of Sodom. And Sodom sits right here, just above the neck of the Dead Sea. You're going to see pictures of this in a minute. We have another mountain range coming down this side, because all of this was created, pick a number, 100 years, thousands of years ago, millions of years ago, billions of years ago. It's called the Great Rift. There was a big earthquake, and that's what created all of this. So the Jordan Valley and the Jordan Plain, you're between 2 mountain ranges. And on this side, and this is not going to be actually correct, we have an important city right there. And in fact, if we go up a little northern, we have a second city, which you're going to see pictures of next week. This is Amman, Jordan. Anybody remember what was famous about Amman in the Bible? Uriah. Anybody remember Uriah? He was the husband of Bathsheba, right? What did David do? They had gone off to war. She was home by herself, bathing on the top of the roof. And if you go to Jerusalem, you'll see that the city is built on the side of the mountain, not on the top. And the king sits up here and can see the rooftops all the way down, which she would have known, by the way. David doesn't go to war that year. David's getting kind of, I'm the king. I don't need to go do that. I'll send my army off and I'll wander around my roof and see what I can see at night. And one thing and another, of course. Well, her husband's off at this battle over there. David asked him to come back. He can't get him to sleep with his wife, which was David's whole thing. You sleep with your wife and that'll be your baby. And he sends him back with a note that says, basically, put him where he'll be in the most danger. And in siege warfare, they were laying siege to Amman. In siege warfare, you don't want to be at the bottom of the wall, because they're dropping everything they can think of, including a millstone, which took him out in no time. So he was killed the siege of Amman. But Sodom sits right here. So just general geography. So we've got Abram and Lot and Sarah. Shechem's up there, Bethel, and then they camp between the two, Bethel and Ai. Then they head for the Negev. And what happens as they head down to the Negev? Anybody remember the story? There's a famine. There's a famine in the land. Now he's coming out of Haran with wealthy. They own people. If you read the scripture, he comes with the people he had acquired or possessed or something, and their possessions and everything, because his dad has died. His next younger brother had died. He's inheriting what Haran left behind, along with whatever Abraham had. And when his brother died, Lot inherited what the brother had. So Lot has stuff, and they're bringing all of it into the land of Canaan, and there's a famine. So what do? They go down to Egypt. And what happens when they get to Egypt? Right, because she's beautiful. And he knows that the Pharaoh will take her into his harem. So they lie about it. They get in there. The Pharaoh is so impressed with her that he gives Abraham these great gifts: gold, silver, cattle, sheep, donkeys, camels, and male and female servants to go with all the stuff he's already got. They're not there that long. The lie leaks out. The Pharaoh gets mad. God's going to, put a hex on us because you've done this to me. Get the heck out of my country. And they pack up with all their possessions and everything, and out they go, back up, and they come up here to Hebron initially, and then camp right around Bethel somewhere. And the problem that they have is that Lot's possessions and theirs, all these sheep, cattle, everything, it needs pasture land way more than they've got where they're at. And that's when Abraham says, you look east or west, I'll go the other way. And so Lot's standing up here. He's looking down on the Jordan plain, which is lush. In fact, it reminds him of the Garden of Eden, the Bible says, God's garden. And he's got all these sheep and everything. And that's Sodom, which was known for its lifestyle and its wickedness and everything. Plus, Jericho's over here. There's somebody coming in. No? Looking for something, I guess. Jericho's over here. Sodom is here. Jericho is a fortified city, right? They're going to have the walls of Jericho fall down eventually. Oh, hey, fella. Eventually, the walls of Jericho will collapse when Joshua comes in hundreds and hundreds of years later. How big was Jericho? 10 acres. Hard to believe. About 2,000-3,000 people living in Jericho. How big was Sodom? Practically 100 acres. And Sodom stood for 750 years until God destroyed it, unmolested by an enemy. It was a huge city, and you're going to see pictures of it in a minute. It's a huge, well-fortified city. 2 million mud bricks just to build the outer wall. Incredible place. So he looks down at this, and all this lush and so on. Man, I'm no dummy. I'm going that way. And it says he pitched his tent towards Sodom and went down that direction. And all of that occurred. Abraham was probably 76, maybe. It could have all happened in a matter of months. We don't know. The Bible doesn't tell us that part.
How old do you think Sarah was when he was still enthralled with her? How old do you think she was?
So this is going to get us into some other discussion, which we'll touch on. She was 10 years younger, so she would have been 65, which raises.
She didn't have a baby till she was
100. Right? She was 90. He was 100. Okay. It brings up the whole biblical age thing, which we could have I could teach a couple of classes on it. I'm taking the Bible at its word, but the reality is, if you step out of the Bible and look at the folks around them, this would not have happened. Pharaohs lived to be 50, 52, 53 mostly, and they were getting the best medical care in the world. And now you have a woman 65 and a Pharaoh who can have every virgin in the land wants her. It doesn't seem to ring true, but we're going to stick with the Bible right now. She was 65, he was 75. And inside of 6, 8 months, 10 months, maybe a year, all of this transpires. So Lot goes. Abraham goes from here to the Oaks of Mamre, which is Hebron. 75, maybe 76. The next thing that happens, Lot hasn't hardly pitched his tent towards Sodom, and the Persian king Chedorlaomer and his 3 other kings, this area all the way down to Egypt had been paying tribute to the Persian king Elam and his buddies. And over here, these guys decided the year before Lot gets down there, we're not paying tribute anymore. In the 13th year, Sodom quit paying tribute. In the 15th year, over here, Elam and his buddies come across the top. And if you read the description of the lands, they basically come down the north side, pillage and grab everything they can get, come all the way back up, and now they're coming up right in this area beside the Dead Sea here, 15th year. Lot's just getting down there and getting settled. Siege warfare, there were two options. Make sure you had a good source of water, stock up your supplies. But Hamas can tell you what siege warfare is like. This is what's happening there. Stock up your supplies. They got all those underground storage and tunnels and all that. Make sure you got a good source of water, which is maybe a challenge for them. And pile up your ammunition, train your soldiers, hunker down, and outlast the enemy in the siege, because most sieges, they would come down, they'd lay siege in the spring. In the fall, they'd leave a token army behind and everybody go back to their farms or their sheep or whatever. And then in the spring, when it's time to go to war, which is what starts off with David's story, they'd go back out again. Sieges could last a couple of years, and several in the Bible did. But we won't go into all of that today. In any case, the other option is you get your other 4 kings. Now you're 5 kings against his 4. You gather your armies up and you camp yourself right here just waiting for them to come up to get you, which is what they did. And they got humiliated. They got absolutely, and the army scattered. It says they ran, scattered. A lot of them fell into what the Bible calls tar pits. I've been over there. I wouldn't call it tar. So the Dead Sea rises and falls several hundred feet over hundreds and hundreds of years. Today, by the way, it's at the same level that it would have been when Lot was there. And if you've ever been around a body of water that has really fallen, around the edges, it looks like there's just wet sand or wet dirt. But you step on it, and all of a sudden that lets go, and there's big sinkholes where you put your foot, you're gone too. And that's what happened to most of King Bera's army. Do we remember what happened to the part that didn't sink? They ran into the mountains right here, up around Jericho, all this area. And one of the folks that was running knew that the Hebrew Lot had an uncle who was a Hebrew living up here in Hebron. And he comes up, and just outside of the other side of Hebron in those days wasn't Jerusalem, it was called Salem. And it had a high priest called Melchizedek. So Abraham is up here, Melchizedek's up here. The guy comes running up. Abraham, they've got your nephew and everybody else. Abraham, this is how wealthy he was, has a 318-man trained army. And they were trained to protect all of his flocks and things. He pulls them out, and off they go. And God gives him a plan. He comes down. So these guys, the army is gone. So Elam and those guys go into Sodom and the other cities, and they just loot everything that's in there. They don't bother burning it down. They want to get the heck out of Dodge. They just grab the people and the possessions, and in Sodom there were about 20,000 at the time. Up they go. This is a huge operation. And so they head north. They got a couple of days head start on Abram, but he's only got a 318-man army. He doesn't have camels and sheep and people and all of that to haul. And they come up the valley and surprise them the other side of the Dead Sea at Dan, it says, which is the most northern part of Israel. They surprise them at Dan, rescue all of this back, and continue to pursue Elam's army. Now, this is 318 people. God really is it's just miraculous. They continue to pursue him all the way north of Damascus. And then finally decide, okay, they're gone. We don't have to worry about them anymore. He brings them back down. They disperse. Melchizedek comes down, and Abraham, they worship God for the big victory, and Abraham gives Melchizedek a tenth of everything that they brought back. Bera is there, the king, coward that he was. He's there. Do you remember what he asks for from Abraham? Anybody remember? It's an important part of the story, actually. Bera says you can keep. Well, he said they ate. Abraham said the only things I want are the food that we consumed and what rightly belongs to the 318 who freed them. There was some, you get 10% of the spoils or something. I don't know. But whatever my men are entitled to, that's what they get. I don't want anything. I never want you to be able to say that I got wealthy off of saving you. Bera says, I don't want any of that. All I want back are the people. He didn't care about the possessions. I mean, wait a minute, you're giving away my sheep and all, you know. He didn't care about possessions or anything. He wanted people to rule over, period. He says, all I want is the people. But Abraham gave it all back, including Lot. Lot moves back over to Sodom with his sheep and cattle and whatever he's got. They give a tithe. We meet Melchizedek, high priest. A lot of discussion about that also. Abraham at that time is probably 76, because this all happens in about a year and a half. It's incredible, because it says shortly after Lot went down to Sodom, all this took place. So Abraham still hasn't aged much. So Lot's over there doing his sheep thing, tent towards Sodom. And at the tender age of 84, Sarai says to Abram, I'm barren, you can't have any children with you, which is a big deal then. It's big for any woman that can't bear, but over there, man, you had to have boys, a lot of them. She said, so you sleep with my handmaiden and Hagar, and you have your son through Hagar, and that's Ishmael. And Ishmael's born when Abraham is 84. When Abraham is 99, God comes to him and says, first, he comes and promises him, you know, your descendants will outnumber the stars, if you could even number the stars. And he says, you need to get circumcised. And everybody in Abraham's camp go and get circumcised, including Ishmael, 99. Later, hopefully after they've recovered from the circumcision, they come back. This is the three visitors. We believe it was Christ and two angels, messengers. The Lord comes back. And the first thing Abraham does is, sit in the shade, wash your feet, fixes a nice meal. They have good conversation, you know, very hospitable. And at the end, as they're leaving, that's when God says, this is why we're here. I'm going to send two messengers down to see if what I've heard about Sodom is true, which sounds odd because God sees everything. But I want some eyewitnesses down there that are going to let me know if what I'm hearing is as bad as I think it is. And if it is, I'm going to destroy the place. And of course, Abraham, compassionate fellow, argues about, well, if you can find 50, please don't destroy it. 40, argues, and he settles at 10, thinking that Lot has been there how long? 24. Well, okay, yeah. You can knock a year or two off, 20, 22, 23 years, something like that. Now, he was down there for a bit, and the hordes came in and hauled him away. You would have thought that'd be enough. I don't want to live down here anymore. But no, he continues to live down there 20 plus years. We'll just go with 20 plus. Abraham's thinking, my nephew Lot is down there. He knows better. 10, there's got to be 10 righteous people down there. By this 20 year, come on, there's got to be 10 righteous people down there. God says, okay, I won't do it if there's 10, and Abraham goes back to his tent. The messengers come down, come through the gate. I was showing you the gateway area yesterday, and they find Lot sitting in the gateway. And what this means is Lot was now what?
He's considered an elder, or
yeah, he's one of the king's court. He's a big deal. He's in the king's court, and we're going to discover when they go to Lot's house, he has a wife. Where'd that come from? And he has 2 teenage children. We don't know their age. I think childbearing is 12, 13, something like that. They're somewhere between 12 and maybe 16. Um, He's been living in the city with a wife for at least 16 years, maybe longer. He's been living down there for 20 plus. So he's in the gateway. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Now, Lot, greets them. They tell him they're just passing through. They're going to sleep in the marketplace that night and then be on their way the next day. Lot says, "What about the marketplace?" Yeah. South Valley? No. you know. Yeah. Lot says, "Oh, absolutely not. You may not even survive. No, it's not safe down there at all. Come to my house. Be my guest." Just like Abraham. Very social, very compassionate, all of that. And so off they go. They go to Lot's house. Before we get to the bad part, what happens while they're at Lot's house? Anybody remember? I mean, at the end, a lot does, but they get to Lot's house. The sun hasn't quite set yet. The bad part happens late in the evening, the Bible tells us. In the meantime, they're having dinner, they're getting their feet washed, they're talking. What are they talking about?
God's going to destroy the city.
Nope.
They're not talking about that.
They never once. We're going to talk about when they told Lot that. No, not at all. What are they doing? I'm guessing, we have to guess, it's not in the Bible, and it just adds a little context. They just spent a day with Abraham. Ishmael was 15. Oh, God did this. They got circumcised. Ishmael's doing good. He's learning how to hunt and all these sorts of things. And Sarai looked real good. Maybe even told him she was going to have a baby in a year. They had lots to talk. Just like if we had guests over to the house for dinner, what are we going to do? We're going to sit around and chat. How are you doing? What are you up to? And all of that until late in the evening, it says. Then we get the knock on the door. And it isn't a pleasant one. And what do they want when they knock on Lot's door?
Want the angels.
Well,
they
don't know they're angels, because there's a whole series of books out there about how these people got destroyed because they tried to have sex with angels. No. They wanted to have sex with his 2 guests, the 2 strangers that had come to town, and he hadn't allowed them to get into town. He got them right at the gateway. And you're preventing us from having sex with those 2 strange guys. Talk about strange. What does Lot do in response to this? Both daughters. Seems very strange to us. Let me tell you, even today in the Middle East, lots of places in the Middle East, women have almost no value. 0. There are plenty of cultures over there yet with multiple wives. And I know of one in particular where he married a very attractive woman, married a couple of years, couldn't get her pregnant. So he went and found another woman, got her pregnant. They got married, brought that woman home as his second wife, and the first wife had to care for the baby. And that's going on today.
Well, my biggest question to God when I get to heaven is, why in the world did you allow men to have so many wives in Israel? And you didn't crack down on the sin of going on with sex and everything, but you cracked down on some of the little bitty stuff that doesn't matter to us.
So I want to be in the room when you ask God those questions.
Well, I may not when I get there, but I can tell you this, it just doesn't seem.
But let's stick to the lesson. We're going to run out of time. I got some great stuff to show you yet. They want to have sex with the 2 strangers. And Lot says, "No, but you can have my daughters," which perfectly fit over there. We'll see other examples of that in the Old Testament. No. And now they get mad. You're treating us like dirt. You want to just give us your 2. We don't want those women. We're after those 2. What are you trying to do to us? What do they say about Lot at that point? How dare you, an alien, tell us what's right and wrong? Now, does that strike you as something weird right there?
He's been there 20 years and he has no testimony.
Well, there's that, and we're going to look at that. He's in the gateway. What is an alien doing on the king's court? What's an alien doing on the king's court? Because I think I figured it out. This is the Bible according to Wes now, because it doesn't tell you in the Bible.
Politics.
Exactly. I'm Bera. I have been embarrassed by this big defeat, and yet I know one guy whose uncle will come and they defeated a huge army, chased them clean up the other side of Damascus. I mean, this is like having a SEAL team as your friends next door. You're never worried about anybody breaking in. And my speculation, this is Dr. West, he put Lot in that gateway as a good luck charm because he knew if anything happened to Lot, Abraham would come down and rescue him again. I would just bet you. Also, again, if you know the culture over there, particularly back then, he had a wife. Where did he get that wife? Wives were arranged in those days. And in fact, his two daughters, he had arranged their marriages with these two guys. You remember, the angels told him to go off and tell them, and they laughed at him. I'm betting you that King Bera or his vizier or one in his high court arranged a marriage for him and brought him in out of the valley into the city to be a part of the society elite, if you will. And then he's in the gate and he's this, and now he's at the house. He's got a house, probably a manger, all this sort of stuff, because we know they surrounded his front door. And it says all the men of the city, by the way. This wasn't just a couple of crackpots coming up there wanting to have sex with two straight. All the men in the city. And says to Lot, you're an alien. How dare you try to tell us how we live? And they started towards the door violently. And what happened? Well, the angels grabbed Lot, pulled him in. They stepped out in front of everybody in the city, all the men of the city who want to have sex with him, and blinded him. And the crowd got confused and it broke up. What happened when they come back through that door into Lot's house? That is when they said to Lot, God is going to destroy this city. Why would they have waited till then?
The people of Sodom played their hand.
Yeah, God said, I'm sending two messengers down there to see if what I'm hearing is really that bad. They just got a good example of it right there. They never mentioned they were there to destroy the city or to rescue Lot because God was going to destroy the city until they had proof that what God was hearing was correct. So now with that as a background, well, there's a couple other little quick things up here for you. So of course, we know the rest of the story. They had to literally had to drag them all out of the city. Incredible. They dragged them out early in the morning, and then the city is destroyed. Brimstone and fire or something like that is rained down on the city. And Lot and them, they head over to, they get the angels to let them go to Zoar. In fact, we find them after the destruction later living in a cave, terrified to go out anywhere, him and his two daughters. The wife on the way to Zoar turns around to see her beautiful city and wishes she was back there, gets turned to salt. Little trivia about that. The number of people who have gone over to discover the pillar of salt would blow your mind. It's a pillar of salt. The first rainstorm, anybody ever build a sand castle and then see what happens when the ocean comes? Anyway, him and his two daughters are living in this cave. What happens in the cave?
The girls get crafty.
They think
Yeah.
that the world is.
If you think Sodom, yeah, they just said, wait a minute, he's getting old. When he's gone, it's just we're going to have nobody to care for us. The whole, I have to have a man. I have to have a male in life. And that's right. And so he's the only guy we got. Grab the wine. Where'd they get the wine from? I'm guessing they grabbed it on the way out the door. I mean, they come in these wineskin things. I don't know. Just, Wes, I'm studying all. I'm going, wait a minute, where'd the wine come from? Doesn't matter. It got him drunk. And one of them has sex one night and one has sex the other night. Two boys. What happens, what becomes of the two boys and their heritage? So we're going to change our map. Yes, well, they become a couple of people. I don't know that I'd call them nations, but yes, a couple of peoples which are significant come from these two boys. So we're just going to do, I don't know, Jordan, I guess, is like this. This is Saudi Arabia and Syria up there. We're going to call this the Jordan, Dead Sea, Jordan River, and whatnot. But this is Jordan. It has a ridge running through it just like Israel does. And the top third, we're just going to put an A there. The middle third, we put an M. And here we're going to put an E. And our E stands for the Edomites, the descendants of Jacob's twin brother, Esau. And they're down here. This Edomites, redhead, he's living in the land of red. I showed you pictures last week and so on. They're down in that area. In the middle of Jordan are the Moabites. Who's the famous Moabite we've studied? Ruth. Ruth was a Moabite. And up here, why do we call this Amman, Jordan? We have the Ammonites. And these two folks, right there and right here, they're the descendants of the two kids that the women have in the cave at the end of the story, so to speak. So with that as a backdrop, let's talk about why God destroyed Sodom. And I know the phrase, if I went into most Sunday school classes and I said, why did God destroy Sodom? What are you going to tell me? Pardon me?
It was evil.
Well, it was evil, but even more so.
Greed and
What's the standard response for?
sexual immorality.
Correct. Well, beyond that, they're going to say they were homosexual. That's usually the response. We have the sodomites today. That's just an evil term you don't ever want to use on somebody. Yeah, they're going to say God destroyed it because of their sexual behavior and because they demonstrated to the two angels they wanted to have sex with guys. Well, what is the problem with that response? I got to get a Kleenex, sorry. Sinuses, thank you. What's the problem with that? And again, considering the known world at the time, what is the problem with that response? He destroyed it because of their homosexual lifestyle. There was a homosexual lifestyle in every city in the whole known world at the time. Even later, the Greeks would recruit homosexual or encourage homosexual relationships in their army. Because the feeling was if I was attached to Lonnie and Lonnie was attached to me that way, we would fight harder to save each other in a battle. The Romans took it even to another step further, and you can read all about that in Roman history. The homosexual lifestyle, male or female, has been with us for a long, long time. They argue that the lesbian culture came out of an island called Lesbo. That's where you get lesbian from. It was very lesbian, if you will, but they weren't the only ones either. This has been around forever. So why did he just destroy Sodom and the four cities if he destroyed it because of homosexuality? Doesn't make any sense. So I'm going to read some scripture this morning. You can kind of follow along, and we're going to see what God says about why he destroyed Sodom. So we're going to go to 2 Peter 2, 6, and 8 first. And Peter's writing about Lot and how he lived in the city and saw all this around him. And Peter says, if he, meaning God, condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ashes and made them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued Lot, a righteous man who was distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless, for that righteous man living among them day after day was tormented in his righteous soul by the lawless deeds he saw and heard. Lot was in anguish, yet not enough to leave. This is awful. Oh, darn, I got to go sit in the gateway. Anything about it. Now, before we go on, so we know Lot was struggling. It doesn't say homosexuality there. It says a little broader. show you the first thing I brought this morning. You can't take, he's seen it. You can't take the lid off this or a ghost will pop out. This is ash from the city of Sodom. What's unique about it, I'll pass it around here in a second. What's unique about it, it's finer than flour. So in fact, I'll pass that around for a minute. So I asked a standard question I've asked every class I've taught this in. What is the temperature? You know, we talked about temperatures for pottery and whatnot. What is the temperature they use to cremate somebody? 14. Yeah, it could be 18. The range I was told is 14 to 1600 degrees. 14 to 1600. Sodom was exposed to heat in an instant, literally in a flash, 20 to 24,000 degrees Fahrenheit, in a flash. And we're going to talk about that. When you have something that big, because we're going to talk about that in a second too, it's in a flash, it comes with a huge sonic wave, if you will. This huge burst of energy goes out in front of it, flattens everything practically, and then blammo, you've got this huge 24,000 degree or 20,000. It was so hot that even the institutes that measure the evidence we have, they don't have gauges that go as hot as this was. Ash, and you'll see there. So what would be the only thing that wouldn't burn in that environment? So if you're in Sodom, it's not an atomic explosion, but it's like a Hiroshima kind of event. What doesn't burn in the city? Stone, pottery, if it's protected. So what you end up with then, pottery, it won't burn, but it will explode from the impact. And we have pieces of pottery from Sodom here that I'll also pass around. And from an archaeological point of view, these are important because, particularly at Sodom, a lot of digs, but particularly at Sodom, you're not going to find whole pieces. You're going to find chunks of things. And how can I tell what that is from these chunks? And so you look for bases. These are bases, handles, and rims. And I don't have a rim. I wish that I did. Those are bases. This is a handle, and this is a handle. And from these, I mean, Dr. Collins, you could give him something like this right here, and he can draw you exactly what that looked like and when it was made and so on. Incredible. Yeah. So that's the sort of what they call them, diagnostic sherds. Now, speaking of that, we're digressing for a moment. I had a word on the board last week, ostrakhan. Did we go look it up? Anybody? No? Oh, I thought you were the Gold Star students over here. Wait a minute. Yeah, the little iffy. So an ostrakhan is a shard, and I don't have one. In fact, if I had an ostrakhan, they probably wouldn't let me take it out of the country. It's a shard. So every village, there are piles of busted pottery somewhere, either outside the village or down at the potters, or piles and piles of it. And at your house, the cooking pots don't last that long, and your dishes don't last that long, and you end up with this pile of stuff. And they were using them like yellow stickies, and they would write messages on these shards. And then when the message, just like a yellow sticky, then just throw it away when they didn't need it. They're really cool if you come across one, by the way. But it's exactly what you guessed last week. That's where we get the word ostracized from. Oh, you just throw it away. So when you're ostracized from the group, you're no longer a piece of pottery or this piece of junk with writing on it, you're ostracized. See, when you go to the next Bible cocktail party, you're just going to be so full of keen stuff. So well, I'll pass these around. So these are the bases off of two pots. If I was a pottery guy, I could tell you a lot about them, but I can't. This is an interesting handle. Well, what's left of it. You can at least imagine it's on the side of a pot or something, with the opposite piece down here gets you the handle. What's cool about this, even though the time has kind of erased it a little bit, you'll notice an indentation in the top here. And that's a potter's mark. And a lot of the fancier stuff, when the potter made it, he had a mark of some kind that he would put on it. So we know at one time that was a pretty pricey piece of pottery. Yeah, that little indentation. It's what would have been in there is long gone. he probably had some little seal or something when it was wet that he pushed in there, and that was his mark, his brand, if you will. Then we have this, which a lot of people go, handle. How's that a handle? And that's a handle. It's on the side of a pot like this, and you would lift it up that way. Now, what do you imagine? So this is a middle bronze handle. What would you imagine would eventually happen with a handle like this, other than this one fell off the pot? But wouldn't it be it'd be kind of easy to have your hand slip off the edge of this and suddenly the pot's on the ground? And yeah, so when you get the early, you get to the late, this is middle bronze, but you get to the late bronze, the hand, you'll see a picture of it in a minute here. We found one out the site. The handle comes up. So instead of leaving it out like that, they bent it up to make it easier to hold on to the pots and things. So this stuff is, so Sodom was destroyed approximately 1700 plus or minus. So that pottery, you add that to 2023, that's how old that is. So Peter said, that's why I stopped here for a minute. Peter said, if he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah by burning them to ashes, and the jar of ashes is sitting right over there. Another thing that we need to consider, we're talking about the destruction of Sodom. You'll see pictures in a minute here. Again, Wes with his maps. So, Jordan River, Jordan Plain, Dead Sea, Sodom. And then we have Gomorrah, and I'll show you again a picture in a minute. And then 3 more going up that way. Over here we have Jericho. It's directly, if you're standing on Jericho, I stood at the ruins of Jericho and looked straight across. I'm looking at the ruins of Sodom. It's incredible. But in any case, so here we have Jericho. Again, if I went into the standard Sunday school class and said, what did God destroy? He destroyed Sodom, Gomorrah, and the cities of the plain. He destroyed this entire area, even up to the edges of Jericho. The entire Jordan plain was not able to, it burnt everything off. Livestock, everything. So, 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. The topsoil, all of it, nothing grew for 700 years in that valley. I'm sorry, 400. 700 was the life of Sodom. 400 years, nothing grew. When something began to grow, it was a weed-looking thing, and I'm probably not spelling this right. It's got a bunch of C's in it. Acacia. And there's acacia growing all around there, and if you study Joseph in Egypt, when his father died, they had this big procession. They went out and they came around this side of the Dead Sea, and they stopped where the acacias were, a place of mourning. So they were actually mourning the death of his father here, hundreds of years later, at the base of the ruins of Sodom. And that's where they mourned for the loss of his father, and then trekked on back the other way. But everything got destroyed. The 5 cities, all of the valley, the vegetation, everything gone completely. Just total destruction. All right, so we're talking about why did God do this? So Jude says, Jude 1, 7 and 8, in a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves up to sexual immorality and perversion. They serve it as an example of those who suffer the punishment of eternal fire. So if you want an example of what hell is like, Sodom was it that day. In the very same way, on the strength of their dreams, we lost Janet. In the very same way, on the strength of their dreams, these ungodly people pollute their own bodies, reject authority, and heap abuse on celestial beings. Now we go over to Genesis. See, make sure I didn't miss one. Yeah, now we're going to go to Genesis. Genesis 18, 20 to 21. Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sins so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. And we've talked about this. That's why he sent the angels down to see if they were really as bad as everybody said. Then later, in chapter 19, we read about this. It says, before they'd gone to bed, and we don't need to read all of this, we've gone through it already. This is when Genesis 19, from about 5 down, this is when they came, knocked on the door, and who are you, an alien, to tell us, and so on. And then, of course, in verse 12, the angel said to Lot, the messenger said to Lot, do you have anyone else here, sons-in-laws, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against his people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it. So for all of the unusual lifestyles going on in the land of Canaan, there's some speculation they had over 1,000 idols. Jordan and that area was no different. Idols all over the place, multiple wives, sex with animals. I mean, you read what God calls out in, what is it, Leviticus and Deuteronomy, I believe. You shall not this, you shall, no sex with animals, no sex with your sister, no sex with your mother. This was all going on over there, everywhere. It was so prevalent, and they were coming out of Egypt. It was clearly happening in Egypt. So why did he destroy Sodom and not all of it? You know, he got fed up with everything the first time, and he saved Noah and his family and destroyed the whole earth. This time just Sodom and the sister cities and the plains and that sort of thing. Well, we can go over to Ezekiel, and God will tell us exactly why. And that's Ezekiel 16, 49 and 50. Now, this was the sin of your sister Sodom. She and her daughters were arrogant, overfed, and unconcerned. They did not help the poor and needy. They were haughty and did detestable things before me. Therefore, I did away with them, as you have seen. They had no compassion for anybody. They were not hospitable. There was no love of anything except self. And anything self wanted to do, that was good, and everything else was bad. That's why I destroyed them. And we know this by looking at Matthew 10, 14, 15. And this is Jesus talking to his disciples at the time. If anyone will not welcome you or listen to your words, leave that home or town and shake the dust off your feet. Truly, I tell you, it will be more bearable for Sodom and Gomorrah on the day of judgment than for that town. So the whole lack of compassion, that's what God couldn't tolerate. And he makes it clear over and over again. So he didn't destroy them because they had homosexual lifestyle. They all did.
That was just one little piece of it.
That would, yeah. But it reflected, when you look at that story and you realize he didn't destroy it for homosexuality, you look at that story of that mob in front of his house, wanting to come in there and take those people out. And they had no heart for anything. They were just evil through and through and through. So we got a few minutes for some pictures. Are we okay, or you need to run?
No.
Okay, I'm going to try. I knew this was going to run long, but I wanted you to have a good understanding of the story of Sodom. Now I'm going to show you some really cool pictures, and we'll try to move along. I know we all got to get going. Hope this doesn't. This is weird. That's okay. All right, so here we go. Is that up there? Oh, I hate how that. Lonnie, that was your job.
Sorry.
Plus, I get to sit by this fan and get cooled off by all the heat coming out of it. So, yeah, go right ahead. He said optimistically. Yeah. I want to start. Is that the okay? Yeah, I want to start here. This is a cool picture. This is up. I've just come down from where God showed Moses the promised land. So I was up another 1,000 feet. We're working our way down that snaky road. Sodom and Gomorrah are in this picture. Now I got to get up. Let me get over to the side over here. So this is, we're on the Jordan side. You can barely see the ridgeline running across there. Jericho is going to be right in here. It's not a good picture for distance. This, and you'll see why in a second, this was the city of Sodom. snugged way tight up against, this is Mount Pisgah we're coming down, or Mount Nemo, I think some people would, why do I say Nemo? It's Nebo. Nemo was a fish they were after.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is what happens when you get a PhD. Your mind just goes. This is the ruins of Sodom, the city. It also had little villages living all around it. And the road you're going to see in a couple of minutes, the road comes around this way, and the angels would have come around. You forded the Jordan River right about in here. You came across about a 2-mile stretch of land, and then you would have come around here and up into the gateway area that we saw last week. This little road continues, wraps itself all around in here. This is the Jordan Plain. This is Gomorrah. So that's Sodom and Gomorrah from about an 8,000-foot view, I guess I was at the time. It gets confusing because all of this is below sea level. How high up are we? Well, we're actually down 150 feet. What? All right. So, oops, we skipped ahead one. And now we can't go back. What? All right, we'll try it this way. There. That, when you first show up, now it doesn't look like this anymore because we have excavated the dickens out of it. This was the first year of excavation at the site. It's a big pile of dirt. You can see the Dead Sea just off to the left over there. And if you look just straight ahead, you'd be looking at Jericho. If you looked up at about 1 o'clock, you'd be looking at Bethel and Ai on the ridge. And if you looked up at about 10 o'clock, 10:30, you're looking at Jerusalem, which is covered in this misty cloud coming across here. And then the road comes down from Jerusalem, gets to the valley floor, you hang a left and you come along, you're at Jericho right across from Sodom here. One of the first things you'll notice when you go to the Middle East, either side of the river, look at all the rock. And it's just the left corner of this picture. Oh, hang on. I didn't realize this stupid thing was in the way here. Get this out of here. Look at all the rest. No wonder they stoned people to death. Readily accessible. Now, the other thing to consider, the hill we came down, you can see a piece of it over to the right as an example. Put your sandals on and go charging up a hill that's like this on the left side here with all that rock and stone and boulders, and go get them, guys. I'll be at the palace. But that's what it looked like when they started. And I don't have a current picture, but you're going to see here in a second if I get it right. So this, as we approached the site, you can see a few of us are taking pictures. This is what it looks like at ground level. It goes up quite high. What you don't realize right now, and I can't back up, I'll get it all confused. We're only looking at the first half of the city. This is the elevated piece. It was like a big shoe print. This is the heel, big one. Then it comes down to ground level, and it's huge on the ground level. That's where the gateway area was. That's where people lived, their marketplaces, their potters, their whatever. All of it, all the way around, was surrounded by a wall. There. That's what it looked like when Lot looked down on the valley. Now, I think the artist had the right idea, but I believe these pointy things, which have a name, and I should know better, but that's the technical term today, these pointy things, that was came along at the time of the Crusaders. I don't think they would have had that in 1700. More likely what he's got for towers along the right are correct. But you have these gate towers, and they're no longer there, but we know they were there because the foundations they're built on are there, and Dr. Collins and his team uncovered them. And you'll also notice the little villages that populate all the way around. That would have been the farmers, the sheep herders, whatever, the aliens that weren't allowed in the city, and so on. The upper part up there, that's where King Bera and the court kind of lived, and where his treasury would have been, and things of that nature. But I like this picture because it gives you a little better. When you're standing in a pile of dirt looking at some rocks on the ground, it's hard to imagine. And all of that was built out of mud brick. And like I say, at least 2 million mud bricks surrounded the city at the time. And this is the ash. And when you're digging down through there, there's about 1.5 meters, 4.5 foot layer of ash over everything. You've got to go through it in a lot of places to get to something. And here we're uncovering, that's a rim, that's a pot rim. that they're in the process of trying to very carefully get the stuff out of. That's why the dustpan thing is there. And I was talking about sherds and shards, bucket after bucket after bucket, all day. You're uncovering this stuff. I mean, it proliferates everywhere. You had 20,000 people living there.
Same thing in the Southwest here with the Anasazi.
Oh yes, with the Anasazi Indians, yeah.
What was left were shards.
Just shard, that's it. Yeah, because the good stuff gets robbed out. As soon as the village is abandoned, somebody goes in and robs out the good stuff.
They made a law after people were taking all that stuff.
Yeah, they call that surface sharding. Yeah. But you get buckets and buckets of this. It goes back to the tent. Sherry did this one year. It goes back to the tent where there's folks, not all ladies, it's a combination, but Sherry was back there. This all gets washed and sorted by what you want to keep and what you want to get rid of. I see this thing is weird. All right. Here's your mud brick. That's one. Weighs about 20, 25 pounds, somewhere in there. Carol Cope, the assistant director, Dr. Cope, is standing beside me. She's smiling, but she's holding her breath. Wes is holding one of the few intact mud bricks we've got. Please don't drop it. And that's why I'm smiling, because that's what she just said. Oh, I'm smiling. Don't you drop that thing. Oh, no, I'm fine. I look like a German tank driver. Okay, so just to give you an area of the site a little bit, this is the Priestley area. Foundation for the Priestley area, different rooms, altars, and so on. The guy on the far right over there is Dr. Sylvia, and he's the one that studied the destruction layer and worked with universities to come up with how it got destroyed and when and all of that. But what you do when you're on teams, you're all over the place, and at lunchtime, the teams get to go visit the other sites. And the team I was with, we were the big bunch, we're visiting different sites here, and that's when I snapped that picture. You don't all get to dig on the level. What you can't see from this picture, to get down to where they were on the side of the steep hill of the city, digging to get down to, in the back, it's in the shadows, unfortunately, is a storage silo. I'm going to show you a different picture in a minute. They had them in the city. Solomon comes along, and the Bible talks about he put store cities in place. They put one here. And they had silos. And then the Romans came along and reinforced them, and they used them as silos for a long time for storage. The other thing you don't realize, I got to point out, is the guy in the middle, all sweaty and dirty with the same German tank suit on, is William Attaway, Dr. William Attaway. That's who edits our stuff and is a pastor of a nice church back in Virginia. Oh, the other thing I should point out, if I can bring it back up. No, I can't. Never mind. This thing's not cooperating. Yeah. About a third of this group is my Sunday school class in Virginia. Okay. Here's what a silo looks like. Now, again, you have to remember, when you're looking at stones, that's not what they saw back then. That you'd put the walls up, and then it would get a mud plaster or a limestone plaster, whatever material, like the Indians do here with adobe. It would get covered in adobe, and then, of course, it has to be maintained. But over the years, that's all gone, and excavating it out, you knock some off as well. But this is a storage silo, and they were standing up on the sides of this thing at an angle to do that. Here we're in the domestic area, and that's Dr. Gary Byers. You met him at the museum. This was the area he was in. What do you think this is? This is a cool picture. Oh, mortar and pestle? Not unless you want to be on your knees or your hands and face to do it. One more picture coming. So back up if I can here. Notice we have stone wall of some kind coming at an angle through the doorstop in the screen here. Then it stops and it goes to the left. Then there's a space and there's more stone wall on the other side, but you have that nice walkway there. That is a doorpost stone. That's a door into that facility where they're excavating. And oh, by the way, they're finding babies' remains in their bones in there. But that's a doorway. And when you find those embedded, you know right away that was a door. And you can see with the stone layout, there's a path into whatever that building was or home or whatever. And they had and you'd have a similar one on top of it, built into the lintel going across. And the door just swung open and go. They'd tie it shut with a piece of leather or something. No, she's got her shoes
Oh,
on.
that's it.
She's
Okay.
laying down. They found an infant skeleton, and they're very careful. You see her little whisk broom, and
Yeah.
she's got a knee pace. She's going to be there a while. But they're very careful about human remains. Yeah, it's a doorpost. Another picture is like, well, that's a pile of rock. Well, not exactly. You got to look a little closer. We have, I'm sorry. Oop, don't do that. We have a wall here, and then we have, I don't know where to stand where I'm not in everybody's way. You see all of these over here on this side? Those are the mud bricks that were on top of that. And they call that a tumble. And I'll show you another picture of it in a second here. And I'll tell you why that's important. That's the tumble there. You can see they fell over on that side of the wall. This is what tells us about what the direction of the impact came from when it came through, is which way the walls tumbled. So again, when they come across one of these, it's a big, big deal because, oh, we can measure all of that and come up with the force of it. Here's another picture of it. And you can see it had some kind of walkway or something between two buildings. That would have been a door, probably a doorstep or something to the far left of us. And what we have laying down there then are all the mud brick that fell over this direction. There is your handle. Remember I said the flat handle, later on they went and pushed it up so you could have something to really grip on. And we found that. There's a little seed pot. Oh, that was the end of it. Okay. Bill didn't miss that much then. Yeah, if you could hit the lights and we'll all be blind for a minute.
So the tumble, what was the direction?
It came from the northeast corner and impacted across Sodom and down either in the valley or they're suspecting it may have impacted in the Dead Sea. And what it was cosmic airburst. A meteor coming through blew up. Just like you've seen in the news where it goes over a Russian city and takes all the windows out as it flies by. This thing came over basically at eye level. It just screamed right past there with this big hot, streak behind it. And it burned everything. It burned the whole valley. So the next day when you read what Abraham did, if you read the next day, it says Abraham got up and walked over and saw this large column of black smoke coming up from the valley. The whole valley was on fire. It would have been a 911 kind of thing on steroids. Huge. And one of the things they're finding as they excavate in the valley, like we saw in 911, it pulls it all up and you get all this tumble and then boom, blows it up. And they are finding stuff everywhere. I mean, plus what it does, it's hard to sort the evidence out because it mixes everything and dumps it back on the ground again. But that's what took it out. It was a meteoric airburst. And there's been studies done on it, several books written on it, a Science Digest thing. The heat was a meteor, and then the sort of the tail or trail, whatever you want to call it, that follows through there. And the speed. I mean, they're hauling when those things come down through there. And that speed is what gives you the sonic burst that's sort of out in front of everything. And similar to you watch those atomic tests, the bomb goes off, and then 2 minutes later, everybody goes, boom.
So, so some of the things that they use to make their pottery and stuff wouldn't have turned up.
Correct. Yeah. So weights for the loom weights that are stone with just a hole poked through them. Lots of pottery, some jewelry. There are pots that come out of the ground completely intact. We found several because you get a big jug of olive oil that takes 2 men to bring it into your kitchen. You put that in the ground. They would bury it in the ground with a lid on it. And when I need olive oil, I pick the lid up, stick my ladle in there, and it keeps cool, keeps it out of the heat, all of that. So they would store grain that way. They'd dig a hole, put their grain pot down in there. And those are the things that we found intact. But all of those belong to the ding-in government.
Thinking, okay, you put a piece of wood in there
Yeah.
and then mold all the whatever concrete type of stuff around.
Well, no, they take a stone and they grind it out.
Actually, it's a solid.
Yeah, they put it, it's a part of the foundation of the house. They put stone down in there and a guy comes along, mortar and pestle. That's what they do with those too. They carve them, literally carve it out, grind it out, whatever. When you got, a city that size,
Tools we have now.
oh,
They didn't
incredible.
have.
Oh my goodness. I'm telling you, there's, if you go over to Bethlehem, they have a living village, I guess you call it, time of Christ. And you can go in there and you can see how the carpenter, what he did to saw something or to measure something and all that. Oh, it's just the, just shearing the sheep and coming up with all the yarn in order to go then weave it, how long that would have taken, and tanning the leather and then making sandals. And oh, yeah, just incredible compared to what we've got now. Well, sorry, I ran over, but I wanted you all to see that. Next week is going to be all pictures, and you're going to love it. I'll just blow you away with pictures next week of all sorts of stuff over there. Well, have a good worship. I got to head home, and we'll see you next Sunday.